Hi, I'm Clint Cearley, freelance illustrator, and thank you for joining me for this workshop video. You can see my painting process for a piece that I'm currently calling Necrolurgy. Now, the brief on this piece was pretty open. They just were looking for a steampunk wizard. Now, there's a lot of ways that you can take that. And I decided to go with the idea that this guy is some sort of necromancer using the steampunk technology to aid his powers for good and bad. Now, I don't know if I'll be doing audio track the whole time, but I thought I would give you a running start as to where I'm at and where I'll be headed with this. And the first thing I did was went out and just looked for a lot of references for steampunk styles, technology, all those sort of things. So back here you can see all these reference images for ideas. And over here in Photoshop, I'm using Photoshop CS4 right now on a iMac 27-inch with 16 gigs of RAM. Okay, so as you can see in my file, I have a couple of layers already set up. Now the drawing, which sometimes they do digitally, but this time almost everything was drawn in pencil, scanned, and then brought together in Photoshop. I'll run through those and show you. I try to keep as few palettes open as possible. I like having as much working area as I can. Okay, so on the background layer you can see, I'll turn everybody off but that. In the background you can see what I sketched there. Originally had a different character in the middle, but I didn't like his design, so I erased him and created a new design. Some of the chains, I went back and redrew the chains for a little more detail. I know that you can get chain brushes on Photoshop, but I've yet to come across one that has a angled chain, as you can see on this middle one, and I really wanted that at an angle, so I had to freehand that. And I copy it, paste it, flip it over to do that one. Okay, I don't know if I will actually paint these pipes in the background, but I sketched those in case I needed some more graphical elements back there. The main character, which I'm calling the Necrolurgist, being a cross between necromancy and metallurgy. And he's got some sort of staff that has a skull at the top of it. That'll probably have some sort of light effect going on there and drawing power out of the skull. Now, compositionally, go over a couple of things. One is, this is not a standard composition that I would use. Normally I have my main characters in a action pose, but I thought it'd be fun to do a piece where the main character was static and all the action and movement is going on around him. And as this piece is fairly open as far as subject matter and look, as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to play around with some styles and looks that I've seen of some other artwork. I try not to experiment too much on my commercial images in case they don't work and need to meet deadlines. And one of the pieces that really caught my eye recently was this one of Brahm. This is a cropped version of it, and I censored it a little bit. I'm not sure what ImagineFX is okay with. But this, again, is a very static pose of the middle character and simple value scheme. She's very light. Background is a bit darker, so you have a very clear 3 tones. I kind of do the same value scheme here is what I'm thinking, but basically do it in reverse. He's going to be darker, the background's going to be lighter. Also saw this lion face, somebody on CG Hub. I apologize, I don't remember whose piece that was from, but I was getting some ideas from that. And another piece from CG Hub. Again, apologize, I don't remember who did it, but fabulous inspiration out there on that site, cghub.com. We haven't been there before. Okay, so there is a drawings folder that's set on multiply so that I can paint everything underneath it and my drawing's going to show up. I'm going to set it down a little bit. I don't need everything to be as dark as possible. This is just a white check layer so I can help see my drawings if I need to. And this is just some base tones that I threw in to get the basic color scheme. I did create this. It's a small palette on the side. I don't normally do this, but it'll just help keep me in check as I go. I'm going to create a new layer and start going in with a bit more detail. These are not my normal brushes. I used these on my last piece and I just haven't cleared them away to get new ones for this one. But I'm going to just start with a regular round Photoshop brush. Should be fine. Now right now the main thing I'm concerned about is getting the overall value screen. When I say values, I'm not talking about, well, that apple costs X amount of, has X amount of value. What I mean is in art, the value is how light and or dark something is. So I'm trying to think through the overall value scheme of the image, what's going to be light, what's going to be dark, and if that doesn't make sense overall, then the whole piece is really going to suffer. So I like the idea of the background being a bit lighter, foreground being a bit darker. You know what, I'm going to just grab all this foreground element. I'm not doing a real clean outline here, I'm just using the lasso tool free-handed. Grab some of these main figures. I don't know, these are some sort of zombies, skeleton guys. And it's part of the storytelling. Kind of like this guy's a necromancer and he's always flirting with death, and it's kind of like these guys are always there, figuratively speaking, trying to pull him down with them. I think that's the basis of the background guys there. I also want to go with some, not a lot of detail, but using more tones, larger gradients of tones, suggesting a lot of mist. Oops. Now I'm just using the Alt key as a little shortcut. If you're on the brush tool and you hold down the Alt key, it will default switch to the Eyedropper tool, and then I can just tap whatever color that I want, switch over to it, and then that way I don't ever actually have to go up here and click on the Eyedropper tool. It saves time. I do not have any green on there. I guess I'll have to use this. I'm just trying to play up atmospherics, so I can turn this on and off and kind of get an idea of the scheme I'm having going. deselected. Just trying to be careful not to get stuck in any details at this point, and would help me to get locked into any of that. A slight light edge fading out from around him, just to help that darkness of his edge have a crisper standout. Go in here and just see about establishing some of the main colors. Bronze is a very fundamental part of steampunk design, so I want to make sure to cover some of those colors in here. I evidently did not put any green in that little palette, but I need some in here. Idea is that over time, of course, it probably won't come across in the image, but just as a little backstory in my head, idea is that this necromancer, the more he uses his powers, that he slowly loses himself to them, and that he's replaced parts of his body over the years kind of as payment for his power, and that his right arm over there is becoming all shriveled and it'll be dark and ugly, and most of his torso and both of his legs have all been replaced with mechanics. He's got this little window in his chest. You can see some of the magic power, whatever, inside. keep turning off the drawings so that I can see what the values are themselves, because eventually the pencil lines will be painted out and what's behind it so will be the only thing that really matters. So I want to make sure that that is as accurate as possible before I start getting rid of my pencils. I'm going to continue with the idea that the background will be lighter than the foreground elements. Just make the pipes a bit darker in the background to make them stand up. I might decide to get rid of them later, but let's put them back there for right now. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take a snapshot there that lays in the basic color scheme and value scheme. And now let's go in. I'm going to make another layer. I tend to add more layers after each stage, and then when I'm confident that the decision is good and I'm to another stopping point, I'll condense them down later. Okay, so this guy I kind of see as a Jules Verne horror story, and he's got some little details on his hat. I'll put those in a second. I think he's going to have some sort of glowing eyes. Maybe blue, got lighter blue. Blue might be his color. Also thinking that he's very corpse-like himself. His skin is very gray. And of course, being steampunk, he's got to have some sort of goggles. So I'll just say that he's got his goggles up on his hat right now until he needs them. He'll take them down. Alright. Now we've got some brassy colors going on. This collar contraption that he wears. I really don't need him to be in purple, so I want to see about switching that maybe towards the gray side. Darken it a bit. It's closer to the brass and the gray that he'll be in. So just do that. Thinking maybe you can see some flames or something inside there. It could be the same color as his eyes, and it'd be a good idea to key all of his magic effects to the same color. Makes it more visually readable and understandable. Yeah, something like that. He also has these bulbs on the side of his arm, kind of showing how much power he has. And he's got this skull and a staff thing up here. It'd also be a similar blue. Maybe it'll be glowing blue from inside. That always looks nice. I'm still at the stage where I'm trying not to be too exact because I don't want to get too focused down too early. Otherwise, I might be committing to a flawed color scheme or value scheme that would end up taking me more time to fix if I had just gone a bit slower to begin with. I don't know, he's got some sort of antennae off of the top of this thing helping to pull in the power. Dad. There's some blue light spilling out from underneath it. That also has like electricity at the top of it, but I can do that later. Well, I'm going to go this way for a while, just putting in the basic blocks of color and basic, let's say details, but tones for each piece. And I'll pick up a little later and we'll go from there. I've continued with the painting, just blocking in the major tones and colors of each area. One of the major areas that I've worked on is the chains. Now the chains I've added to a new folder you can see in the layers palette, with various ones being on their own layers. That way I can easily paint them independently from the background or vice versa. Just keeps it a lot cleaner. I've gone up here to the character, put in some of the brass, laid in tones around here, did some work on the staff, and overall it's coming along pretty close to what I'm looking for in my head. And I will just continue along and clean up some of the edges, make it a little more fine-tuned. This edge doesn't have to be exact, but I did spend a while trying to come up with a shape that I liked for the edge of this smoky shape, and I like to keep that if I can. I admittedly have a very limited knowledge of mechanics, so I apologize for any oversights in the way that I've designed any of this. Okay, I think it's about time I start laying in some tones on these little skeleton guys. Might throw that on a new layer. Oh, I did update my brushes in between this recording and the last one. I got one that was more of a traditional brush bristle end on it. I can do a large stroke here and you can kind of see what that looks like. I'm not wanting to go into too much detail with these guys, but I do need to suggest some shading on them. Could have made them complete skeletons, but to be honest, seems like that would take a lot more time to get all the bones to look correct. So I'll just make them more like mummies, very skeletal, but still have some flesh left. I'd like to add some texture to these guys, like like you see on mummies, the old mummy corpses. The skin is still there, but it's become so dried and paper-like, and it's got creases and folds in it as it's dried out over time. So I'm just trying to go in and add a bit of that, but I need to lighten the background drawing so I can kind of see what my paintings look like. There we go. I'll come back and do some of the work on the hands later. Right now I just need to know if basic tones are working on these guys. So I'm getting outside of the value range I really want to see on them. That dark is getting just a little too dark. Just trying to be careful to keep a very limited value range. I don't want these guys in the background to have nearly the contrast that the rest of the image does, and certainly that the main character has. I want to keep away from using blacks, keep away from using whites, but just keep in a very limited middle range of values. Yeah, I'm just not real happy with that arm at all. Simplify that. And I want to paint this little pipe that I have going in front of this guy's head. Actually, I need to paint that guy's head out of the way. Pipe's in the front. Now I have masks set up on both the main character drawing and the background with the skeleton guys and the gravestones. And I can erase out what I need to without actually erasing it. I can just paint it out in the mask using black. If you don't use masks, then I suggest you learn how. They're a great tool. It used to be difficult in Photoshop, but just a little cumbersome to set up a mask. But in the last several editions of Photoshop, they've made it a lot easier. And it simplifies the workflow a lot more now. Okay. Since that pipe and his head were almost the same value, they were slightly different colors, but they were the same value. Couldn't always see one over the other, so I just want to lighten that corner a bit so that you can tell that they're separate pieces. And I'm not sure what I was thinking of right there. So I'm going to paint it out. Maybe he has a shoulder there or something. This guy's really back in the fog pretty good, so there won't be much darkness on him. And I'll let you sketch in that other arm before I do much there. Just have one arm kind of coming out of the mist. And let that drift back down. And it occurs to me that I erased my standard round brush. That's a bit light. Just want to add a bit more light in the background. I want to do that on this layer. It still feels like there needs to be more light back here. Oops. And things should get a bit darker up in the corner. Basically, I want it to be kind of dark along the top to help keep the eye in towards the main character. Yeah, that's close to what I was thinking. Alright, now what about going in, doing a bit more detail work on him, cleaning up what I might not have put in too well the first time. That's my palette. Now with this model, I want it pretty dark on the edge so that you have a nice clean silhouette against the background. And then it mainly stays dark and has a high contrast jump when it gets into the light areas. So it goes from dark to medium dark and then jumps to medium light pretty quickly. I'm going to turn off the chains for now. They're just overlapping my character, and I'm going to be able to paint them without that getting in my way. I'm getting pretty close to the point now that I need to make a new layer over the pencils and start painting them out. About everything that I need to establish in the underpainting has now been put in. Let me put the chains back and See what everything's looking like. It's always a good idea to shrink down your image and look at it small. Make sure the overall design is working as far as colors and values. It's easy to get it big and think everything's working. But if you can't read it well visually as a small thumbnail, then you probably need to simplify your design. When I get it small, I can still get the overall idea of what's going on. I can make out some of the figures. I can see my main character. He stands out well. And just flipping back and forth between my previous snapshot and where I am now, it's a good idea for me to help keep me on track to make sure it's going the direction that I want, that I didn't start veering off color-wise or detail-wise from what I had in mind previously. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video here, save some snapshots, and come back a little later.